Good morning. I call the Senate Finance Committee meeting to order. Today is Saturday, March 21st, 2020, and the time is 9 a.m. We are meeting in the Senate Finance Room in the State Capitol. Please silence your cell phones. This is Co-Chair Natasha von Imhof, and I'm joined today by Senator Stedman, Senator Bishop, Senator Olson, Senator Wielechowski. We also have Senator Keel, Senator Coghill, Senator Rivak, Senator Stevens, and Senator Giessel joining us today.
Every single person that works for the special interests, not Alaskans.
So, I'd like to start off with thanking everyone for being here today on a Saturday morning. As you know, we normally don't meet on Saturdays, let alone a Saturday in March. But as you are all aware, we are in unprecedented times. We cannot delay. We are watching this virus run over New York, LA, and Seattle hospitals. We are reading about communities shutting down, one after another, asking people to stay in their homes. Businesses are laying off workers and closing their doors. People are not traveling. Kids are not in school. This coronavirus is hitting us in two ways. First, it's an acute health and medical emergency causing life-threatening respiratory infection in some people. Second, the economic impacts are also severe, and there will be long-lasting effects for months or even years to come. Our goal here today is to explore what programs and assets we already have in place so we can leverage our existing infrastructure, both public and private, in order to support Alaskans as quickly and efficiently as possible. We invited several folks to testify today in the areas of housing, unemployment benefits, small business support, food insecurity, connectivity, and the supply chain. We want to ensure Alaskans that we are working on a plan and we have the infrastructure in place that is sufficiently funded to provide the needed resources to help people immediately during this difficult time. The legislature is looking at enhanced employment, unemployment benefits, mortgage assistance, food aid, interest-free loans, expanded child care and health care services, and direct aid to communities, and more. Already in the supplemental budget, the legislature appropriated nearly $20 million in state funds specifically towards health care to help Dr. Ann Zink in her gallant efforts. We are also closely watching what the federal government is doing, and we are seeing a large COVID-19 omnibus bills pass, several of them, with significant bipartisan support to provide immediate cash assistance to both individuals and businesses as part of a comprehensive economic plan. For Alaska, it is imperative that we have laser focus on our state accounts and various funds so that we can direct our scarce and dwindling resources towards the greatest impact. It is also important that we utilize federal funds as much as possible and avoid potential redundancies to make sure that we maximize all funding and ensure our state agencies are ready and poised to receive the money and use it wisely with the broadest benefit. Alaska is experiencing a perfect storm, a most terrible trifecta, the hat trick from hell. We are being hit on all sides, with the stock market crash, oil prices plummeting, and the tourism and fishing season all but idle. Alaskans should rest assured that we, the legislature, are taking action. A bipartisan group of legislators is putting a plan in place. We are working days, evenings, and weekends, and Alaskans are our priority. We cannot afford to wait, and in addition, any plan we put in place cannot exploit a pandemic to further any political agenda. Hardworking men and women who, through no fault of their own, are struggling to pay bills and put food on the table. We will provide the helping hand. With that, I'd like to start our presentation. First up, we have Alaska Housing. Actually, what we'll do, I'll back up again. We have about 5 minutes. We're going to start Alaska Housing at 10 after 9. I want to state on the record that Senator Wilson is here with us. For 5 minutes, is there anybody at this table who would like to make a quick comment, a moment or two, before we begin? Senator Bishop.
I would just like to A question from the chair. I usually like to close with some comments. I would just like to save my time for the end.
For the end?
Mm-hmm.
Senator Stedman.
Madam Chairman, just for the public watching it, there's clearly an expedited process that we're going through here in the legislature, and we have substantially constrained savings accounts compared to the last several years. So we're trying not to replicate anything the federal government is doing, and that we are an additive to it. So just for the public, just to kind of keep that in mind as we look at unemployment benefits, housing issues. We have a lot of agencies in the state already with some structure that can help. So we're putting this mosaic together, and it'll be coming together in just a handful of days, literally. I hope 2 or 3 and we're done.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman, for joining us. So as listeners or as invited testimonies on the phone, what we're hoping is that each agency can state on the record what is it that you're doing during this time, and what can the state do to help you with your efforts. If you could all address this as you go through the invited testimony, it will help us define legislatively, particularly and potentially financially, what we can do on our end these next few days. So first up, we have Brian Butcher with Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. So Mr. Butcher and Stacy Barnes, please proceed whenever you're ready, and we have you until about 9:30.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, my name is Brian Butcher, CEO, Executive Director of the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. I would like to touch on the housing market as a whole, our public housing, and then also homelessness. Starting out with the housing market, we are fortunate in Alaska as we go into this public health crisis that has created a fiscal crisis, in that the strength of our housing market, even after having 5 years of a recession here in Alaska, has been very strong. Our delinquency rates of our portfolio of 16,000 mortgages is under 3%, which is almost at a historical low in our 49-year history. Our foreclosure rates are under 0.25%. Again, that might be the lowest in our 49-year history. We don't have the majority of the mortgages in the state, and I believe the state numbers are slightly higher, but still very low. Low compared to Alaska history, low compared to other states. We've also benefited by having very low interest rates, and that's a difference between now and 08-09. Interest rates weren't sky high in 08-09 like they were in the 80s, but they were higher than they are now. And so most people have been able to refinance their mortgages into very low 3%, 3.5%. Some a couple of weeks ago even got into the 2 3/4, 2 7/8. So that gives home owners a lot more flexibility in terms of the funds that they have to run their household than they would if we saw higher interest rates. That being said, we are looking at potential how we're going to handle those numbers coming up. As I'm sure you're aware, the governor had an executive order yesterday that announced a moratorium on foreclosures and evictions in housing for HFC for corona-related viruses, which are basically homeowners that have difficulties with reduced income, loss of jobs, medical expenses, anything that is connected to this crisis. We worked with the governor on this. We believe it was a good step to allow Alaskans to understand that they can move forward and deal with the situations they're dealing with in this crisis and not have to worry about being foreclosed on or being evicted from the homes in which they live. And I'm happy to respond to questions there, or I can continue with the rest of the presentation.
So I'm looking at my committee members right now. Please continue.
Okay. Moving on to public housing, we have HFC runs over 1,600 apartments in 13 different communities. We administer 5,000 to 6,000 vouchers to Alaskans. These are vouchers that Alaskans get from us, and they go to private sector landlords. These programs are federally funded through HUD. We receive $60 million approximately a year to run these, and we see an average of $3 million a month going out of AHFC to private landlords and vouchers. These are folks that we're concerned about. I think when you begin to talk about layoffs, you look first at Alaskans that are living paycheck to paycheck. And this tends to be the lower income individuals that are in our housing. As an example, over 80% of the 12,000 Alaskans that are in our housing are at 30% of median income and under. So these are Alaskans that if they didn't have help with housing, they would be homeless or near homeless. And so this, I believe, is the most vulnerable population, certainly on the front end of this crisis. The governor also had an executive order yesterday in working with us that put a moratorium of 60 days for evictions. Again, for corona-related issues, there will be no evictions moving forward. So the folks in our public housing units and the folks that have vouchers that are renting from private sector landlords do not have to worry about potential losing their housing. They can focus on the other issues, food and the other staple issues that they need to focus on to continue life as we move through this crisis. And then the last topic, Madam Chair, has to do with the Homeless Assistance Program. And once again, as we deal and look at people that have been living paycheck to paycheck, it doesn't take a lot to move them from a situation where they're getting by to a situation of potential homelessness. We have a lot to thank the legislature and the governor for the early passage of the mental health bill, because the Homeless Assistance Program and the Special Needs Housing Program that work in concert to deal with the homeless have been funded early. And I know some of you are aware that the way the Homeless Assistance Program is administered by AHFC is when we work with the shelters, they sign 3-year contracts with us. And the reason for that is it's very difficult to have a nonprofit survive with the expectation that the funding may go away in a year. So it's in the capital part of the mental health bill. We administer it over 3 years. And when the mental health capital bill passed early, that gave us the flexibility to use some of the funds that would have rolled out in 21 in FY20. So we executed grants to our providers, 41 providers in 13 different communities to be able to access the funds early, to administer between FY20 and FY21, because we expect in the fourth quarter of FY20 to potentially see a spike in the number of people that need the services. And then they're also able to use those funds over FY21 so they can smooth them out to make sure they're managed it, not just for the end of the current fiscal year, but into FY21. So those are the big picture areas that we have the most concern about.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. I'd also like to point out that we had dropped a bill, an operating budget last night on the table here in Senate Finance that included full funding for AHFC and all the different programs. Yeah,
that's very much appreciated, Madam Chair, and I'd like to point out specifically as part of our homeless assistance program is a homeless prevention program. And that program works to stop people that are near homelessness to fall into homelessness. Studies show that it's about 4 times less expensive to keep a family in a home than it is to have to take a family out of homelessness and put them in a home. We see the average cost of helping somebody avoid homelessness as about $500 an Alaskan. So that's something we're also very much focused on because, as I mentioned before, we see the possibilities of a large number of Alaskans potentially being close to homelessness, and we want to make sure that we prioritize this program to make sure, if at all possible, they don't move into homelessness in the first place.
Yeah, so thank you. Before I go with Senator Wilson here, that's actually one of the questions I want to ask you is just make sure who people right now who are not current AHFC program participants but are close to it, just want to make sure that they can get the help that they receive, and it sounds like they can turn to you. Is that correct?
In the different programs, if you're talking about the homeless assistance program, they would reach out to the shelters. And then the shelters would then talk to us. If we look as if we need increased funds, that would then work up to us. But we're not the boots on the ground. It would be the shelters that they would contact. Just like if an Alaskan's having an issue with their mortgage, they feel like they've lost their job, they have concerns on if they're going to be able to make their mortgage payment, they would contact their servicer. Their servicer is who they make their mortgage payment to. The servicer would then work with us, and we would encourage Alaskans to contact them earlier rather than later. If you feel like there's going to be an issue, you need some help, or there needs to be a suspension or other potential tools we have, the sooner that the servicers and Alaska Housing knows, the better.
Thank you, Brian. So we have Senator Wilson has a question.
Yes, thank you, Director Butcher. How are you handling mortgages in process? Are those still going through as normal? If people have time to withdraw, if they're a little concerned about that, what's currently being done with that?
Through the chair, Senator Wilson, that's actually a great question because a lot of the stress we've been dealing with in the last week has had to do with that. We are still offering an interest rate. Potential homeowners are still able to lock in. However, that interest rate has gone higher and higher almost by the day. And the reason for that is we saw interest rates drop below 3% last week when the Fed dropped their numbers to zero. However, what we're finding out is that the banks and the mortgage companies and the credit unions that are the ones that make the loan, and then either we or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac purchase the loan, they're finding they're unable to sell the loans. And so Fannie and Freddie aren't buying. We're kind of in the only game in town. And again, our interest rates fluctuate based on what the cost of capital is. I know I'm getting into more detail than you probably need, but right now the capital markets, there's no liquidity. We couldn't sell a bond if we needed to. And so as our funds get lower and lower, if things stay the way they are over this last week, we're not going to have the option to access Wall Street for capital through the bond market. So we're still seeing the mortgage. There's still mortgages being done. There's still people locking in, but it's shrinking by the day.
Thank you.
Senator Bishop.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to play off Senator Wilson's question, I heard on public radio last night that existing Fannie and Freddie loans were going to be a 12-month moratorium on them if you couldn't make your payment. Have you got advisement on that?
Through the chair, Senator Bishop, I know the president put out an order for suspension on that. I don't believe it was that long. I believe off the top of my head it was 60 days or 90 days, but we'll get back to you on that. I think the thinking is similar to what we have been thinking, which is we're going to deal with the short term. If it gets near the end of the 60 days and it appears as if this is continuing, I'm sure conversations will go on with the governor to look at extending that.
Senator Bishop, follow up?
Well, I'll let Senator Stedman go, but then I got a different line of question.
Well, just kind of add on to the previous two questions. The rental market and all of the citizens around the state that rent their housing. My understanding is there will be no evictions for some period, 60 days or so. Do you know anything about that? And can you highlight that for the public?
Yeah, through the chair, Senator Stedman, there is a 60-day moratorium for all of the public housing voucher holders that are in the close to 6,000 apartments across the state. However, that is not the majority of apartments. We do not run, nor do we have vouchers in the majority of apartments. So at this point, I don't know what the situation is with that. I've seen different governors in different states take a look at having a broader suspension on evictions, and some have found they have a lot of flexibility, and some have found that they haven't. We've had conversations with the governor's office about that, but I'm not an attorney, so I don't know specifically kind of where they are with that.
You have a follow-up, Senator Stillman?
Just, Madam Chairman, I think that would be good information to get out to the public and clarification for us, because if this does go on beyond, if there is a moratorium for 60 days on evictions, and when we get into this exponential virus growing in the state, we may need to have to extend that. So we just need to be up to speed on that also.
So, Mr. Butcher, if you could come back to the committee with just, is it 60s at 90 days, if you have any information on that moratorium. And before we go back to Senator Bishop, the question that I have for you is, you do receive federal funds now. Are you poised and able then to receive additional funds, federal funds, when these omnibus bills are passed?
Madam Chair, yeah, we are poised to accept them. We certainly would have need for them. The question would be if we have federal appropriation authority. We certainly don't have excess federal appropriation authority if a substantial amount of federal funds come through. And for the benefit of the committee, the corporation has been used for a lot of federal emergency funds. As a good example, much, if not most, of the disaster relief funds that came through after the 1964 earthquake came through us. And I don't believe we have that number, but we also don't have a ballpark number on what we might need. So hopefully that would be possibly an LBNA request.
Yes, thank you for that information. I think that's the kind of information that we would need. And I think, and you did mention that you have liquidity now, at least for the foreseeable future. And I think the goal is for the federal government to get its portion out as soon as possible as well. Senator Bishop.
Mr. Butcher, how do you determine who qualifies for a rental voucher?
Through the chair, Senator Bishop, we have federal rules that we go by with HUD. They're different for whether you get into public housing or whether you get a voucher. It's a requirement of 50% of median income and below for the public housing, and 80% of median income and below for vouchers. But there is a prioritization based on need. And so that's why, as I mentioned, even though somebody of a little higher income would qualify, they tend to, 80% tend to be very low income. And there is waiting lists in most communities, and they vary depending on the size of the family, because HUD restricts what size of apartments, numbers of individuals can be put into, and we can certainly provide the committee with a list of our waiting lists by community if you'd like.
Follow up. Thank you, Matt. Mr. Butcher, Madam Chair, thank you. One just quick question. When you provide that to the committee, the other question I had, and if you don't know, you don't have to answer right now, but is there people that are on unemployment, are they eligible as well to apply for this rental voucher? So thank you.
Yes, through the chair, Senator Bishop, they are.
Thank you.
So thank you. I think I also want to point out to the committee that we have a comprehensive list here today, housing being one, but there's more than one way to be able to pay for your rent. One of them is we're hearing now with Alaska Housing Finance Assistance, but we're also looking at wage replacement. So if we can try to provide wages to businesses to pay their employees, then they can continue as normal, and I put in quotes, normal here. So there's many different ways, and we're just looking at all the different options right now. So we have about 4 to 5 minutes with Mr. Butcher here. Do we have any other further questions about housing assistance? So the question I have for you is, aside from wage replacement, what it sounds to me is folks who are not already an AHFC program should either contact their banks if they have a mortgage, should, you mentioned homeless shelters, who will then turn around, both banks and homeless shelters will turn around and contact you. What our committee is going to try to do is get telephone numbers so we can put that maybe on the legislative website. We have your website up, Mr. Butcher. Do you have staying on top of the coronavirus? Are you putting, is this open, our public housing offices can be reached by phone? So you have phone, and so people can click on that and get your phone number. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have closed our offices to the public, so to restrict for public health reasons, but they can get to us through email, our website, or a 1-800 number.
And you have sufficient employees being able to handle that call volume?
At this point, we do, and I anticipate for the near future we will.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Butcher and Ms. Stacy Barnes, thank you both for calling in this morning. Our next subject is small business, unemployment benefits. I apologize. Unemployment benefits. We have Ms. Patsy Westcott, Deputy Commissioner of Department of Labor. And we heard from Patsy before, but we're going to quiz you again. So thank you, Ms. Westcott, for being online this morning. What we want to reiterate is kind of much what we talked about already, but with the unemployment bill that we had. But we'd like you to state again what resources you have in place now in terms of financial as well as employees being able to handle the volume. Are you poised to receive federal funding when it comes through? And then number 3, what can the state do to help you with your efforts?
Well, good morning. Thank you, Chair Von Imhof and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Patsy Westcott. I'm the Director of the Division of Employment and Training Services with the Department of Labor and Workforce Development. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about Alaska's unemployment insurance program and what we can do in response to the conditions that we are faced with today. So just a little brief overview of the unemployment insurance program. It is an insurance program as opposed to a social service program, much like your car insurance. Employers pay premiums in the way of tax contributions into the program to protect against an employee's future loss of wages. And in Alaska, we are only one of 3 states that has provision in statute where the employee also pays a portion of the UI tax contributions. Currently, our maximum weekly benefit amount is $370. Alaska employers that are really trying to do right by their employees, and so they have questions about, how to lay off their employees and make sure that those employees are eligible for benefits. So we're working on getting information specifically all on one page so that whether you're an employer or an employee, you can get out there and access everything that you need to know about filing for unemployment insurance. One of the things that would be very helpful is there are a couple of pieces of legislation before the Alaska legislature, that is House Bill 308 or the companion bill, Senate Bill 240. Both of these pieces of legislation would enable our program to even further liberally interpret the able, available, and actively seeking work requirement of the program so that we can pay even more individuals that are unemployed through no fault of their own, and they are available for work, but they can't actively seek work right now because businesses are closed. So the restaurant worker who is laid off can normally go to another restaurant and apply for a job, and that is simply not the case at this time. And so those pieces of legislation would allow us to really be able to address that problem more efficiently and expand eligibility. In addition, they provide for a larger dependence allowance, and they remove the cap of 3 dependents. So for those families that have more than 3 children, they would allow us to add extra dependents to someone's claim so that we can provide for those families during this time. It also removes the waiting week. So currently, Alaska has what's called a waiting week, and so when an individual applies for unemployment insurance, the very first week of their unemployment is what's called a waiting week, and we can't pay benefits for that waiting week. And those pieces of legislation would remove the waiting week requirement so that we could actually pay that first week. And that's really crucial, especially now. So that's kind of where we're at, and the things that we have done to date, and I am available for any questions the committee may have.
Senator Bishop.
Thank you, Patsy. That was a very good comprehensive overview. If we can get 308 done, passed in the next 24 hours, I know you're programming right now. I'm a little concerned. I want to get this done because I know you had 4,700 people or rounded last week that applied. This isn't law yet. Is there? I know you're programming your claim system, and I think time is of the essence. So these people don't have to call back and reapply again on this waiting week. So would that help you if we can get this done? The governor can get it signed in the next 24, 36 hours.
That absolutely, through the chair, Senator Bishop, that absolutely would help our program. The one caveat that I would have would be regarding the effective date of the legislative change. And so currently I think the legislation is written that the changes are effective immediately. For us to go back and to apply those changes retroactively, the effective date of the legislation would need to provide for that.
And just one follow-up, Madam Chair. Ms. Westcott, have you guys been thinking, I know you're already thinking it, but if you could help me, are we thinking about drafting another letter to the delegation, maybe about some additional, just in the queue down the road? We've got a very healthy trust fund. I just want everybody to understand that. But we want to plan, be forward in our thinking and planning, a letter to the delegation for additional, maybe emergency grant UI funds like we encountered in 2008.
Through the chair, Senator Bishop, I know that letters have already been submitted to Alaska's congressional delegation. I also know that the I think it was HR.
Yep.
Yeah, 6021. I think that Congress passed and the president signed does have provision in it for additional administrative funding for the unemployment insurance program. In direct response to COVID-19.
Thank you.
So on that, Ms. Westcott, just want to make sure, are you poised to receive federal funds when they are released?
Chair von Imhof, that is a very good question. I do think that The division currently, there is a potential conflict of not having enough federal authority for FY20 to accommodate the receipt of additional federal funds.
Okay, so thank you for that. So what it looks like, two things. We have this bill that you talked about us with this 308. It's in this committee now, so we're going to work with our committee members to move it out. But it sounds like we may have to do a CS. With the CS, we may increase the federal receipt authority, as well as you mentioned that you'd like the effective date. Can you give us what you believe an effective date would help work for you? It would be the beginning of March, the second week of March. What would be work so we can get it ordered?
That is an excellent question, Chair von Imhof, and I guess my recommendation would be the beginning of March, the first week of March. That's when we started to see, at that time it was kind of a slight increase in claims load. That has certainly ramped up, especially this past week. But certainly the beginning of March would allow us the greatest flexibility in being able to really respond to the needs of unemployed Alaskans.
Okay, and so in the CS, if we increase the federal receipt authority as well, this will allow you then to receive the federal money when they're released.
Chair von Imhof, that's correct.
Senator Stedman, followed by Senator Willicott.
I think we could take a look at, we have several vehicles, I think, that could expand the receipt authority, so it may not necessarily be this vehicle. It takes an appropriation bill, I think. But we can definitely be on point to make sure that the department has ample federal receipt authority like we did Medicaid to deal with whatever comes from Washington over the next several months. So we'll footnote that and make sure that that's taken care of.
Okay. I had Senator Willicott, unless you have a point on okay, Senator Willicott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had asked the other day about the comparison with other states, and I know you're busy. I haven't seen that yet, but I just looked it up on the Congressional Research Office, and at least last year it looks like, well, Alaska's is $370 max, and it looks like Oregon is $648 per week, Washington is $790 per week, Hawaii is $630 per week. If you look at oil-producing states, North Dakota is $618 a week, Texas $507 a week, Oklahoma $520 a week. It looks to me like ours is just woefully inadequate. Would you agree with that?
Through the chair, Senator Willicott, our maximum unemployment insurance weekly benefit amount is very low, given the average weekly wage in the state of Alaska. I do remember your request for our for those charts. Those were sent up to our commissioner's office. My apologies that you have not received them yet. I know they're on their way to you. We are 37th in the country with regard to our maximum weekly benefit amount, and we are last in the country with regard to our what is called wage replacement rate. And the wage replacement rate looks at the average weekly benefit amount for the state as a percentage of the state's average weekly wage, and we are last, and that includes after Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands.
So, Ms. Westcott, did you say, though, that I thought I heard you say that in the Bill 308 there was a provision for a temporary higher amount for the weekly benefit? Is that correct?
Chair von Imhof, that is not correct. The bill does not include provision for increasing the weekly benefit amount. What it does do is it increases the dependence allowance from $24 a week to $75 a week per dependent, and it lifts the cap on the number of dependents that we can consider.
Okay, so is that then a potential avenue? I guess we've had conversation with Senator Bishop. Is there a way to do a temporary higher amount for the weekly benefits? If so, do we need a statute? And if not, how would that look?
Chair von Imhof, yes, benefit amounts are set in statute. AS 23-2350. So it would require a statutory change in order to increase the maximum weekly benefit amount. And what that would look like is unknown at this time. I do know that at a congressional level, Congress is looking at, so let me back up just a minute. Back in the recession, the 2008-2009 recession, Congress passed a number of pieces of legislation, and one of those pieces was called Federal Additional Compensation. And what it did was it, for all states across the nation, regardless of what their weekly benefit amount was, it added a dollar amount to every payment that went out the door. And so I do know that Congress is looking at doing a similar provision now that would add to a state's weekly benefit amount in the form of additional compensation that would be 100% federally financed. I had to respond to USDOL yesterday with questions about that. What I don't know at this time is the amount that they are looking for, or that they are looking at implementing, but I do know that it is something that is being looked at a national level.
Okay, at a national level. And we did increase, within the bill you mentioned earlier, the dependent issue by taking the lid off of that. So there is some wiggle room there. We have about 4 minutes left. Senator Wielechowski.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I know there was some testimony the other day about we have a very significant balance in the UI trust. If we increase the minimum weekly benefit, or the maximum weekly benefit, say $100 to $470, how much would that impact our the trust fund?
Through the chair, Senator Wielechowski, I don't have an answer for you. That is certainly something that we can take a look at, that I can have our UI actuary take a look at. I know that he has already done some significant stress testing on our unemployment insurance trust fund, meaning that he has taken a number of different proposals and ideas and looked at what that would do to Alaska's trust fund if we were to implement those provisions. I know that our trust fund is extremely healthy at this time, and we are well poised to weather this storm that we find ourselves in today.
So we have just a couple minutes. We do, again, have this bill in front of us, and it's imperative that we move it out here quickly. As Ms. Westcott has stated, the number of applicants for unemployment insurance has increased dramatically. We do want to make sure that we provide benefits for people to help them get through this time, but we also don't want to overstress the accounts, and we also want to provide, we want to wait for the federal money to come in too, which hopefully should be soon. The next issue, or the next presenter, though, is the small business support, and ideally we want to have wage replacement for people and provide businesses loans so they can continue paying wages to alleviate the need to go to unemployment insurance. So it's all sorts of different tactics that we're looking at now. So Ms. Westcott, thank you very much for your invited testimony today. We really appreciate you calling in on a Saturday. Our next presenter is Mr. John Bittner with the Alaska Small Business Development Center, support for small businesses and avoiding business failure. So we have John Bittner, and we also have Joe Shearhorn, the CEO of Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. Is that it? or he's with the Bankers Association. So we're going to start off with Mr. Bittner with Small Business Development Center. So Mr. Bittner, what we're asking presenters to do is to kind of discuss the resources that you have now to handle the increased volume and payout in terms of employees and cash resources. And number two, are you poised to receive federal funds when they are released? And then number three, what kind of things can the state do to help you? So, the floor is yours for the next 10 minutes, and take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is John Bittner with the Alaska SBDC. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. A quick overview of the SBDC, what we have currently in terms of resources. We've been helping small businesses in Alaska for the last 35 years. Just to clarify what that means in terms of what a small business is, they tend to be businesses under 500 employees. So as you can imagine, in Alaska, that represents a little over 99% of all the businesses in the state. We advise 1,600 to 1,700 clients in one-on-one advising sessions, confidential advising sessions, and we provide workshops and training to another 1,600 to 1,700 Alaskans every year. We provide services in over 100 communities, and we have physical locations in 7 centers across Alaska: Anchorage, Fairbanks, Juneau, Matsu, Soldotna, Seward, and Ketchikan. As you can imagine, and as the previous speakers have mentioned, small businesses are being hit particularly hard right now. AEDC, the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation, recently mentioned that they had released a survey to judge the impact of the COVID-19 virus on businesses. They've received over 500 responses. 90% of the people, the businesses surveyed, said that they have been negatively impacted. What we're seeing in our clients, we've, like I mentioned, seen a significant upswing in the number of businesses contacting us. We're seeing revenues being slashed by 30 to, in some cases, 100%. A significant number of workers are being laid off. I'm sure many of you have seen the reports in the news. The Matanuska Brewing Company had to let 147 people go. The folks that own South Bistro, Spenard Roadhouse, Crush, and Snow City Cafe released 223. The Sheraton released 80. The Fifth Avenue Mall in Anchorage closed down entirely. And Chena Hot Springs released 100 people. And these are just a handful of the larger stories out there, but I can tell you that there are many other businesses out there that are following suit that haven't been noticed yet. Rural Alaska in particular has been having difficulties, especially with moving to remote operations. Most companies are trying to do telework, things like that, interact with their clients online. It's a little more difficult in the smaller communities, but what we're seeing is a large number of the telecom utilities stepping up and really trying to help out in that front. And I noticed that they're on the agenda later, so I won't steal their thunder, but they have been offering some fantastic opportunities for Alaskans to get online at this time when they need it most. Some of the industries that have been particularly hard hit right off the bat, obviously the food and beverage industry, the entertainment industry, tourism. Actually, even though the season hasn't necessarily officially started yet, this is the prime booking season for most of them. And also, unfortunately, because of the seasonal nature of their industry, some of the worst times for them to run into cash flow issues. This is sort of the lowest ebb before the money starts coming in from people booking their trips. Industries that are going to hurt in the near future, we're projecting energy, largely due to the oil price fluctuations on a global scale, manufacturing, seafood, and retail. But to be fair, to be honest, this is such a wide-ranging economic upheaval that every industry in the state is going to be negatively impacted in some sense, with a handful of exceptions. To give you a feel for the scope of how bad this is potentially getting right now, the CEO of Marriott International recently sent out a video to all of his hotels and employees telling them where they were at. He noted that the impact of the COVID virus situation was worse than the impacts that on their business model from 9/11 and the 2009 financial crisis combined. Each of those events caused about a 25% reduction in revenues across the globe. The COVID virus is causing a 75% reduction worldwide. hundreds of their hotels are closing and employees are being laid off. All of their food and beverage services has been canceled. SBDC is doing what we can to stay ahead of the crush. We're offering we've moved all of our online, or all of our workshops online. All of our offices are working remotely. Every training we've got is we're offering it for free now. It seems like a good time to make sure people get the information they need without worrying how to pay for it. We've developed a series of new flyers and training specific to reacting to the impacts of the COVID-19 virus. Specifically, we started with the food and beverage administration, or food and beverage businesses. We're working with the national restaurant chain representatives to develop webinars specific to restaurants trying to transition from in-person dining to takeaway and delivery. We're also moving into ways that we can help the tourism industry and other verticals that are getting hit hardest, fastest. In addition to that, we are working on developing or hiring on new contractors, short-term contractors to help us with the overflow so that people can get services and assistance as quickly as possible. I have about 9 advisors statewide currently, and that is just not enough, quite frankly. But the good news is we can onboard new contractors. We've been working with several people over the years, and we've been preparing for not this particular event, but something of this nature for quite some time. We're also launching, I believe later today, a dedicated web page that is going to collect all of the business assistance, resources, information, and local government and state government websites that we have access to. We're trying to serve as a central repository for small businesses to find what they need as quickly and efficiently as possible. We've been working extensively with local governments across the state, regional economic development organizations, including the ARDers, and on some levels the state, to try and help get ahead of this, stay informed, to make sure that the information that goes out is the most accurate that we can provide, and to let people know what resources are coming down the pipe. It's not all doom and gloom. There is some good news. The state of Alaska is, I believe, next in line to get approved for the SBA disaster assistance loans. This is a loan program that provides funding up to $2 million to qualifying businesses at a rate of 3.75% over 30 years. Nonprofit organization rates, the nonprofits are also eligible, and their rate is 2.75%. This can be used for payroll, accounts payable, other bills that are coming in, things along those lines to keep the businesses afloat. This will help. It's not a silver bullet. Not everybody will be eligible, but this is a step in the right direction. Additionally, Alaskan businesses are stepping up. It's been a really amazing thing to watch, quite frankly. You mentioned that Mr. Shearhorn is going to be speaking next. The banking community in particular has really done a yeoman's work working with their clients to help find ways to keep their doors open, make sure that they can manage the loan payments, doing all sorts of things without being asked. I mean, it's really good to see that happen. The telecom industry as well, I mentioned that GCI and others are really stepping up to help provide internet to the people that need it most. The transportation industry has been doing phenomenal work. The 5,000 or so individuals, Alaskans, that are employed there have been doing amazing work. And last but of course not least, the shopping or the supermarkets, the stores that are providing the food for folks. The people that work there have been amazing, and the stores themselves have done a fantastic job of trying to prevent hoarding, and also many of them offering hours specifically for seniors so that they can get what they need without having to fight the crush of folks that are trying to stock up their larders. Beyond that, you would also ask if we are capable of taking federal dollars. The SBDC program in general is, as far as I can tell, included as in the $1 trillion relief bill that is currently working its way through Congress. It will provide us with additional funding to expand our operations and provide additional services. My understanding at this point is that that funding does not come with a match requirement, which is very good news. And so at that, if under the current circumstances, we are completely able to accept those funds and we will deploy them.
authority to do that?
I believe that actually might be the case. I'll have to check with you, but yes,
okay.
I suspect that is.
You were providing us some amazing information, and we really appreciate it, but I want to give time for committee members to ask a couple questions, as well as Mr. Shearhorn to chime in. So I'm just going to pause right now and turn it over to Senator Stebbin, if that's okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Absolutely, I was done.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think, if I recall, the interest rate was around 2 3/4 and a $2 million cap for small business. Is that correct? Through
the chair, the nonprofit rate was 2 3/4. The small business interest rate is 3 3/4.
And the cap is $2 million?
Through the chair, yes, sir.
Madam Chairman, we need to get, I think, some clarity between what the federal response is going to be for small businesses and our state agency, because $2 million in a bridge loan, if you have 25, 50, or 100 employees, isn't going to last long. Mm-hmm. So we need to make sure that there's the capacity to deal with some of these small businesses, so when this economy starts livening back up, they can, get back to work, so we don't have losing our small businesses. We'll have nothing to start back up.
Okay, so we will look at that on our end and maybe look at our congressional delegation and ask them about that. Mr. Bittner, Senator Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bittner, do you know when you expect the centralized website to be up and going?
Through the chair, yes, sir. We anticipate it to be online today.
Great news.
Great. And do you have sufficient employees to help you with this extra call volume and additional volume in general?
Through the chair, currently yes, but if the volume continues to grow as exponentially as it has been, no. And so we are looking into hiring contract employees and short-term workers to fill the gap until we can staff up fully.
Okay, great. And do you need any statute change or anything from the state to be able to do that?
Through the chair, I don't believe so, no. But I will double check and get back to you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Bittner, you've been extraordinarily informative, and we really appreciate your invited testimony today. I would like to pivot to Mr. Joe Shearhorn. We have about 8 more minutes here to talk about the private banking sector, and Mr. Shearhorn is the President and CEO of Northern Bank. Mr. Shearhorn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the opportunity to make this presentation to the committee. I had a similar opportunity yesterday with the House Finance Committee, and so I'll try and make similar comments here. First off, as Mr. Bittner had indicated, and as you all are aware, this is a wide, sweeping impact to our entire economy. So we have a number of customers who will have entire seasons curtailed almost completely, if not completely, according to the current information that we have, particularly in Southeast Alaska and those throughout our state centered around the tourism industry. And then there are many other rippling effects to this, which you also are aware of. So what are we doing? We're reaching out active. So I'm going to, in part, say what Northern Bank is doing, but really this is couched the financial institutions statewide. I'm representing our bank. I'm a member of the Alaska Bankers Association, but I'm speaking with regards to Northrim here, and I'll flow over a bit to other financial institutions. So we're actively reaching out to our customers to work with them on a case-by-case basis for modifying, deferring payments, offering them additional capital where it makes sense for them. We have indicated to the administration, the state administration, that we would fully support the recently announced state guaranteed loan program, in which the governor is proposing to have a program that mirrors, the best I can tell, mirrors the SBA program disaster relief program that Mr. Bittner just alluded to, with a $2 million cap to individuals in need at this point in time. So I view that as a positive, as does the rest of the financial institutions. With regards to our operations, we are open for business with our customers, as I know all financial institutions throughout the state are. We're directing our customers to utilize electronic banking services that we provide to them 24/7. We have a call center that we provide to our customers 24/7 also. But we are open for business throughout the state through our branch system that stretches from Fairbanks all the way down to Ketchikan. And the banking industry within Alaska is quite strong. They've worked very hard since the financial crisis to build up significant reserves of capital and liquidity to be able to provide services to our customers. So we're here to support the state in its efforts to work with all individuals and businesses throughout the state in this time of need. And I can be open for questions that the committee may have, but I just want to stress a few other things prior to your questions. You had asked several times what the state can do. So, one, support the loan guarantee program that the governor is proposing, which may require specific legislation. Not sure how this is going to be affected, but there undoubtedly will be some demands or requests made to you to implement this. Two, there is a huge volume of mortgage refinance activity in the pipeline right now, as well as other transactions that will require recording of deeds of trust in the state recorder's office. It's critical that that office remain open throughout this entire time in order to have the people be able to take advantage of the refinances that are in process and or other purchase transactions. But there is a very, very large volume of that type of business going on now, and it'd be very disruptive if that was curtailed as a result of the recorder's office being closed. So I'll stop now and be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a question from Senator Stedman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to hear from him. I think we're all very comfortable with the fiscal position of our banks. They're very liquid, well capitalized, and we should be very proud of that. But I'd like to know what's going on with your customers.
Right.
You know, coming in the door, the business community coming in the door, giving you a heads up that they're going to run into trouble, and how far out, that trouble may be. The earlier testimony was a comment, I think, dealing with Marriott hotels, looking at a precipitous decline relative to the last two economic downturns combined. And I would think that the business customers would be sitting across your desk discussing their fiscal position and how to get some help. So can you tell me what's coming in the door?
We're beginning to get those requests, and those businesses that have been more on the front end of this have been more proactive in contacting us and initiating discussions, requesting modifications of their payment structure and or additional working capital to allow them to continue operations, to continue to pay their employees in this time of need. But as this situation has evolved very quickly, particularly over the last month, this is really just beginning, but I anticipate that it will be a very large volume of our activity going forward into the next 90 days. So the first quarter, not much with regards to that. Just starting in the past couple of weeks. I anticipate that it will increase greatly, particularly originally said, for those businesses hardest hit in the hospitality, bar, restaurant, hotel, tourism industries, where they've had very, very large, very recent drops in their business.
Senator Stedman.
I think there's a need in the tourism industry, and I'm no expert in the industry by any means, but people prepay for their cruises and their tours and their, all their vacations in Alaska, through vacation packages or what have you. Are you seeing a significant amount of that industry coming in asking for help on cash flow, dealing with potential returns of funds for pre-purchasing activity for the summer?
Through the chair, that is beginning to happen, yes. And I would anticipate that we will get many, many more requests going forward as a result of just what you said. Because in many cases, I think the entire season will be canceled for a large section of that industry, as it stands now. And so they are getting large amounts of cancellations as a result of the current situation, and so I would expect those requests to increase dramatically here over the next 90 days.
So thank you, Mr. Sherhorn. I just want to basically add one last thing here, is that in regards to pledging state assets that the governor announced yesterday, no executive branch can pledge state assets, can appropriate, can provide loan guarantees without, or otherwise, without legislative approval. So that's something that we have to talk about on our end. The other issue is that I think it's imperative to leverage the federal funds where appropriate and where available. And that is, those federal funds are slated to go into the Small Business Administration. And even though Mr. Bittner stated earlier that they did not have a match requirement, which is great news. To the degree where it makes sense, it is imperative that the public and private work together to provide the greatest amount of financial support and spread the risk and share the risk among the different entities and the different funding sources in the foreseeable future. Okay, we are over 2 minutes of our time, so Senator Bishop, you're the last question.
Joe, thanks for presenting here today. Hey, can you confirm that the governor's moratorium on foreclosures applies to private financial institutions, or is that just to the state entities like AHFC?
So through the chair, I believe that is pertaining to Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. So we had a number of discussions with regards to this at the House Finance Committee meeting yesterday. The different mortgage programs that are supplied by investors, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Veterans Administration, would be three major programs out there. Each program is administered according to their own guidelines. Basically, they set their rules with regards to that. And so our state, through our state action through AHFC, is totally separate from all those other programs. So I don't believe that any moratorium that is called with regards to a state program would flow over to a federal program, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Veterans Administration. Now I'm just giving you what I believe to be the case. But there is a wide spectrum of mortgages out there that are guided by and controlled by the investors in those programs that basically set the guidelines. So we are actively working with each one, and as are all financial institutions, actively working with each one of those investor-sponsored programs to, again, work with them to be able to work with our customers on deferment or modifications of payments with regards to those types of mortgages.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr.
And then one last comment, just to respond to your comment, Madam Chair, is that our bank, as I know other banks and credit unions too, are engaged with the Small Business Administration, and we will actively support that program with regards to disaster relief financing, as well as work through the SBA and their other available programs. And then we actively work with the Bureau of Administration Affairs, Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority. There's a number of other agencies that we can leverage in this process to provide financing and also modifications to existing debt out there that is supported by these different agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Sherhorn. We really appreciate both you and Mr. Bittner being on the phone today. Thank you all for what you're doing for Alaska's businesses. It is a critical component in this time. We are going to move on now to food insecurity or food security. We have Kara Durr, the Director of the Public Engagement Food Bank of Alaska, and Adam Ziegler, Executive Director of New Hope, and Mr. Ziegler is, both of these people are directly boots on the ground, right there seeing people face to face. So we have about 15 minutes for you guys. So if you just want to take the floor, let's start with Kara Durr, please.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. So Food Bank of Alaska is a statewide agency. We work in partnership with our 3 sister food banks in Fairbanks, Kenai, and Juneau, and about 150 agencies statewide. Obviously, food insecurity and ensuring adequate food resources is a huge concern during this pandemic, and our network of food pantries, soup kitchens, and meal programs are really bracing for a huge spike in need in the upcoming months. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how food banks are responding and then highlight a few federal resources, and Adam can kind of give the on-the-ground perspective. So we're continuing to push food through our normal channels of distribution through our partners, but we're really focusing on adapting to the rising need and then, of course, the unique challenges of the virus that it places on our distribution model. I think the good news is we have a lot of federal commodity food on hand because of the ongoing trade mitigation purposes. And we have a lot more food ordered that will be coming to us in the upcoming weeks. We're likely going to have to purchase some food locally in the next few weeks just to deal with what is going to be a huge spike in need and fill that gap before the other food comes. But overall, I think we feel like we're in a pretty good place to deal with the situation, and we've really just seen a huge outpouring of community support in the last week alone, so that's all really positive. There have been some positive things happening in Congress. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act was signed into law this week, and that has an additional $400 million in commodity purchases, which will be really important for food banks in our network. We've adapted our mobile food pantry distribution, which is happening in Anchorage. We've moved to a pre-box option just to minimize client exposure. We're also going to be handing out grocery gift cards there from thanks to a generous donation from Safeway. And then we are preparing to do delivery of boxes to seniors who want to stay in their homes. I think the shift to pre-boxing is really necessary, but of course with that, it's pretty work intensive. So I know we and our partners are all seeing a need for volunteers, especially as many of our long-term steady volunteers are seniors and are staying home right now. And then I'll just touch on a couple of federal resources. Obviously, top of mind is, how are we going to feed kids when schools are closed? The state child nutrition programs and the school districts have done a really phenomenal job of applying for waivers really proactively to help get this food to kids. In many cases, grab-and-go meals are provided at select sites. And then we are working with the state to identify districts that are having a hard time with this model, and we're looking at a really promising alternative that USDA just announced, which is a program that mails meals directly to school-age kids in rural communities. And then finally, there's additional resources for school-age kids and their families in the federal bill that I referenced before in the form of supplemental EBT funds. And then SNAP, or food stamps, of course, is going to continue to be a really critical program for Alaskans in need. Experts say that after unemployment insurance, SNAP is the best response to a worsening economy. The Division of Public Assistance has done a tremendous job of quickly applying for waivers and pursuing options that is going to streamline SNAP delivery, and I think they are bracing for a huge spike in applications as well. So if people are unsure if they qualify or want help in applying, they can certainly contact BPA. They can also contact Food Bank of Alaska's outreach team. We're trying to help BPA take some of the pressure off and help clients during this time. And then there are additional investments in SNAP that are being considered in Congress right now, such as raising the minimum benefit and boosting existing benefits, and we're very supportive of this. So kind of what the legislature can do, what we need as a state, I think that as a network, we have really been focusing on trying to pull down more federal food resources. And I think we're reasonably prepared as an anti-hunger network, but I think we really need to think long-term here. I think there's going to be ongoing need to provide more support to our partners in rural communities with food, and particularly with shipping costs, because a lot of this food we're going to receive from the government in the commodities food has limited shipping dollars with it. And then, we're just encouraging a long-term view, because depending on the length and the depth of this economic recession we may be going into, we heavily depend on community donations, and that's really strong right now, but, we could see a huge drop in the coming months. And then finally, I think just making sure that the state agencies who are going to be hit really hard have the employees and resources they need. So all the resources that I mentioned can be found on our website today or Alaska 211, and that's what I have. Thank you.
Ms. Durr, that was very comprehensive, and we appreciate that. So folks can go to the Food Bank of Alaska or United Way 211 and get answers to some of these questions. You did mention federal resources are going to be forthcoming here shortly, but to also remind us to think long term. And I think that's one of the things I'd like to remind, that it's the state that may have to be paying for things that the federal dollars will not pay for, such as shipping food to other parts of Alaska, as well as what's going to happen in October, November, December, fourth quarter of this year. We really appreciate that. The other person on the line is Adam Ziegler with New Hope. Adam, you're up.
All right. I'm glad to be a part of this discussion. Just some things to let you know about on the ground level as we're serving clients. After the first week of social distancing, most pantries have seen about a 50% increase in families coming to use their services. Our pantry specifically saw a 20% increase in new clients, so new families who have never used our food network before. In talking with Covenant House, a lot of their workers have been looking for food pantries to get food for their young adults that they've housed. What they're finding is that SNAP benefits are not going as far as they used to because of the run on grocery stores. Most of the food that people have stockpiled is low-cost food, ramen noodles, low-cost soups, low-cost fruits and vegetables that are canned and frozen. And so that's really minimizing how far SNAP benefits are going right now. We're hearing more stories of people who have lost their jobs and are out of work needing food. Every grocery bag saves them money and allows them to keep the lights on, allows them to keep themselves in their homes. We are anticipating growing numbers over the next 2-3 weeks. And if we continue to see 50% increases every week, we're really going to see a stretch on the food security systems that are in place, whether it's our food pantry or other food pantries around the state. And so I encourage, as Kara did, to think about delayed response, not just immediate responses. The SNAP waiver for able-bodied adults is a great first step. I heard from the AHFC, the homeless prevention program, funding that is making sure that stays in place is going to be a huge benefit in the months to come. And then also investing in the shipping and supply chains. Many ways that we can support them in our communities is going to be excellent. One of the things I do want to add to what Kara said was there's also an app available called Got Food with a question mark. It's a very easy resource for legislators. When folks call your office, just type in their zip code and it'll give you soup kitchens and food pantries in that community. And that's GOTFOOD with a question mark, Got Food.
Thank you very much. Question is, what are your fund sources in a normal year? Do you have state? Is it all private funding? What's your revenue source?
So I can only speak for our food pantry. Our programs are mostly privately funded with a few business contributions. Our program doesn't receive any state or federal funding, so we're looking at reduced funding in the future as folks are cutting back on their generous contributions and they're giving to nonprofits.
Okay, so it might make sense then for the state to just look at and consider that as we debate this and see if it makes sense to provide funding specifically for food pantries across the state and how that might look like. So we'll think about that. And thank you very much. I hate to cut you guys both off now, but we're going to continue to move on with broadband. So Ms. Durr and Mr. Ziegler, fantastic testimony today. Thank you. Our next up is...
Let's now discuss how we can destroy our school system.
And education.
Oh, wait a minute. Fix our school system. Bring them into the 21st century. And eliminate $600 to $700 million in overhead by doing everything online.
Telecom Association. Just a couple minutes then, because we've got a bunch of folks that we're going to kind of go up and down the line. So, Ms. O'Connor, can you tell us about what's happening in your world and how you're doing, what are you doing to kind of help increase broadband across Alaska? Take it away. Christine just dropped off. Great.
Tyson Gallagher.
Okay, Tyson Gallagher with GCI. Did you hear what I just said? Can you do that?
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Hi there. I'm sure Christine will be back in a minute. I'll speak briefly to some of the things GCI is doing during this time. Absolutely recognizing that people are going to be spending more time at home. They're going to be working from home. Kids are going to be going to school from home. And generally, people are going to be using the Internet a lot more, and they're going to be using it at the same time. GCI has extended an offer statewide where if you're a current GCI home Internet customer, we will upgrade you to the next plan up the level, up the ladder, so you get more speed and more data to use at home. And if you are not a home Internet customer, we will offer you free entry-level Internet for the next 2 months. And I'm available to answer any questions if anybody has any.
So thank you for that. I guess the question is, if you talked about people, if everyone's using it at once, could that potentially crash our system?
No. I think Christine will speak at a higher level to the statewide abilities, but I think we feel confident in our ability to maintain our networks. It kind of depends on the technology serving a community. If they have a middle mile connection through fiber or satellite or microwave technology, that can bring about some capacity constraints. But overall, we feel confident that the network can handle this increased demand at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gallagher, talking about free entry-level Internet next couple months, extended offer statewide to upgrade you to the next plan. I saw Senator Wilson had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gallagher, for being online. After the 2 months, does someone need to cancel that plan if they got upgraded, or would they be charged, or would they automatically be demoted back down? How will that work?
Through the chair, Senator Wilson, thank you for that question. I think we've got a piece of information we're trying to get out to offices that just got approved yesterday for me, so I'm getting that to everybody if I haven't gotten it to you yet. We're going to automatically upgrade our customers' plans who are existing customers, and at the end of that time frame, that will automatically revert back down. For people that are not currently customers and would seek to get that free entry-level plan, that comes with a Wi-Fi modem. You would need to return that modem at the end of the time period, otherwise the billing would continue.
Senator Wilson, followed by Senator Hoffman.
Yes, and how will that work for sort of your microwave or satellite customers out in more of the rural areas?
Thank you. Through the chair, Senator Wilson, thank you for that question. Part of what the logistics we're trying to get our arms around is our ability to actually work directly with our customers. We're devising a variety of scenarios where we may leave home install kits with instructions, and then we've actually closed a lot of our stores in Anchorage, and we've converted them to call centers to provide additional help to people. So we're kind of still getting our arms around that to the greatest extent, but we want to make sure that everyone's connected during this time.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gallagher, I thank you for that that service that you're offering people of Alaska in this time that we're having a lot of stress. But the question that I have is, how are you disseminating that information so that all people of Alaska can benefit from this, people in the far reaches of Alaska?
Through the chair, Senator Hoffman, thank you for that question, sir. I appreciate that's a really good question. We are currently trying to communicate to our customers through primarily through email and social media posts at this time, as well as we're working directly with our commercial customers, our business clients, as well as at a residential or customer level to communicate options to people. In addition to the measures that I mentioned, we're also working with those eligible applicants to get them signed up for the FCC's Lifeline program, which would provide access to a low-cost wireless device that could be used potentially as a hotspot. And we're working with the Department of Education to deliver education on a broader level as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher, for that comprehensive explanation, and thank you for what you're doing with the businesses and with the families here and households. I see that we have Ms. Christine O'Connor with Alaska Telecom back on.
Madam Chair, before Mr. Tyson leaves,
yes,
at the appropriate time, I'd like to ask him a question.
Well, so here's what we'd like to do is there are some granular questions about how GCI is handling, different customers and so forth, but folks can ask GCI directly. If it's more of a larger, umbrella type of question, by absolutely. But we have about 4 or 5 people online for this.
Okay.
Senator Olson?
You want me to ask it now?
Yeah, he's on the line right now.
Mr. Tyson, good morning.
Good morning, Senator.
I have in front of me what GCI has done for the internet options for Alaska K through 12 students and teachers. And one of the things that I did on the 17th of March, I wrote a letter to GCI in particular, and was wondering, as you look at some of these options that are for the essentially the rail belt or those customers that are out there, as opposed to those people, especially the students that are trying to go ahead and continue on with their education, all I see is there's going to be an upgrade, a free upgrade to the next level of CIRT plan, but that includes a higher charge. I guess I'm asking, is there any consideration that you will not charge the extra fees for this at this time?
Through the chair, Senator Olson, thank you for that question, sir. I was hoping you'd ask that. I saw you'd written that letter. I saw it on Facebook, so I appreciate you posting that. So to answer your question, we are taking steps to offer free additional data and speed to all of our customers statewide, both in urban and rural Alaska. Like I said earlier, recognizing that everybody's going to be at home, everybody's going to be using the internet more, and they're going to be using it simultaneously because they're all at home, we wanted to find a way to provide more data and more speed to everyone, but recognizing that different parts of our network have different constraints depending on some of the variables that I'm sure Christine will get into, whether it's technology or capacity constraints. And so in order to keep our network viable on a broad scale and be able to deliver premium levels of service to everyone, rather than offering unlimited service or mitigating those overages altogether, we've just upgraded everyone to the next plan free of charge. And so we think that that will provide the greatest lift to everyone while maintaining the network's viability. Does that make sense, sir?
It does, and as the only internet provider for much of rural Alaska, I want to thank you for what you've done so far. And with that, thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Senator Olson. Thank you. So I would like to hear Alaska Telecom. Ms. Christine O'Connor, can you hear us?
Thank you. you, Chair. And my apologies. I had technical difficulty on my end. My name is Christine O'Connor, for the record, and I'm the Executive Director of Alaska Telecom Association. With me on the line today and available for questions, as you've heard, Tyson Gallagher from GCI, but also from Alaska Communications, Heather Kavanaugh and Rick Benkin, from Aztec, Jen Leipenix and Luke Middle, and from MTA, Michael Burke. This morning, I would like to give you a brief update on the status of Alaska's telecom networks in light of the difficult circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 virus. Our goal during this time is to keep our employees safe and customers connected. Alaska's telecom providers are following guidelines from the CDC and the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services, as well as guidance from Speaker Edgman and the Bush Caucus advising against travel to villages, or at a minimum consultation with local leaders. We are also following the governor's advice that is given daily as far as travel and other safety restrictions. In thinking about the capabilities of Alaska's telecom networks, which Tyson has already given you some very good detailed information, at an overview, it is important to understand that they use different technologies that have different capabilities. In our more populated areas, the connection to the internet is undersea fiber from South Central to Seattle, and that is a robust connection. It's scalable and allows relatively quick increases in response to demand. Over 80% of Alaskans are served by that fiber backhaul. In regions without access to fiber middle mile, they may be connected to the internet by microwave and our satellite connections. And these technologies have much more limited capacity, but local systems are calibrated for available bandwidth. A recurring concern I've heard recently, and that was raised today, correctly so, is can the networks handle the influx of traffic from telework, distance education, quarantine, and people just staying home to protect others through social isolation? Yes, the networks are handling the increased load at this time. To give a little perspective around this issue, Alaska Communications has shared that the increase in traffic they are seeing now is actually less than what they have experienced when the last two versions of Call of Duty were released. The networks are performing well. All providers are monitoring usage levels. Monitoring network performance is standard practice to ensure proper traffic management, detect and resolve problems before they impact users, and minimize disruptions as quickly as possible. These things are baked into how we operate networks, and they help ensure Alaskans remain connected. ATA members are working in partnership with communities to expand access to residents. For example, in the Mat-Su, MTA is working with the cities and borough to create drive-in hotspots so people can access the internet from their cars, both providing access to those who may be lacking and supporting the social distancing that is so important right now to everyone's safety. We recognize this situation is bringing severe economic burdens to many Alaskans. ATA's members have committed to the Keep Americans Connected pledge, which includes commitments to, 1, not terminate service to any residential or small business customers because of their inability to pay their bills due to the disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic. 2, waive any late fees that any residential or small business customers incur because of their economic circumstances related to the coronavirus pandemic. And 3, open Wi-Fi hotspots, open existing Wi-Fi hotspots to any American who needs them. In addition, additional hotspots are being added. In addition to these measures, families needing greater assistance may qualify for discounted internet service through the Lifeline program. More information on this program is available on every provider's website or by just calling their local provider. And we have many local providers, GCI, of course, but then statewide we have multiple other local providers that are also offering Lifeline. We are actively working with all anchor institutions in our areas on what they need and how we can support them in the short term and long term. Also, we are keeping in close contact with other utilities in our areas and coordinating our efforts to the maximum extent possible. We are coordinating with the federal response teams and keeping them appraised, as well as various state agencies working on this crisis. We are also working with the Rural Healthcare Program participants to increase bandwidth for healthcare facilities as needed at no charge. The length of time to implement these increases will depend on the Federal Communications Commission guidance and their waiver of certain rules, which currently define bandwidth through September 30th of 2020. The other most frequent question we've gotten in the past week is about how we can help while schools are closed. ATA's member companies, including those on the line, have made commitments to support students and teachers. AgTech is providing credits for increased usage. Alaska Communications is providing free service. GCI is providing a free service or upgrades, and MTA is offering free upgrades. Every provider is working with school districts throughout the state to identify solutions that fit their schools and the networks that are available. ATA is coordinating with Commissioner Johnson and the Alaska Council of School Administrators to do everything we can to help kids keep learning. We just want to assure you and all Alaskans that every telecom provider in Alaska is responding and is committed to helping our state, our communities, and our neighbors stay connected. Thank you for inviting us this morning. We are all available and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor, for that comprehensive overview. We have our first question from Senator Wilson.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor, for being available today. And I guess my question's for all industries, but since you're on the phone, and I appreciate the no late fees and looking back not to disconnect service for lack of payment. But sooner or later, the bill's going to come due. How many months will you offer the non-disconnect for lack of payment? Because as soon as someone gets a job, they're going to be a month or 2 months behind in all their bills and payments. And I can only imagine trying to play catch-up is going to take quite a long time if you don't offer a discounted rate or just don't offer rate payment for that entire month. Then that person's always going to be underwater trying to catch back up to pay all their bills from all utilities. And I'm just trying to see how long will that sort of disconnect payment lasts under this circumstance.
Through the chair, thank you, Senator Wilson. That's a great question, and I think it is developing daily how long this situation is going to last. We are working closely with our national association, and also ATA is communicating with our congressional delegation as far as resources that may be needed in the long term to support this. I think it's very clear from what we're hearing today that there will be a long time for consumers to catch up. So I don't have a specific end date because I think we just don't know how long this will last and how much resources will be needed. But it is on our minds for sure.
I think this pandemic is a gift that's just going to keep on giving over the next several months, and I think the fallout is unknown at this time, from individuals to households to businesses. And I think it's important for everyone to kind of stay flexible as we move forward, but also keeping an eye on liquidity. We have, like I said, folks from all over the state right now, but Ms. O'Connor does sort of speak for the group. We do have the supply chain up next if we want to continue with that, or unless we have any more questions for broadband at this point. Thank you. And all folks on the connectivity, thank you so much for including the issue with education. That is a big deal for our elementary school kids, high school kids, adult learning, and so forth, the university, to maintain online classes for the foreseeable future, since it looks like schools are going to be closed probably for the rest of the year. So thank you all very much for being here on a Saturday, and we really appreciate it. So the last presenter for today is the supply chain, and we just want to make sure that we just don't run out of toilet paper. And Mr. Val Dreyfus, the Senior Vice President of Alaska of Matson, is on the line. And I think, Mr. Dreyfus, what we definitely want to hear is how it's going in your world, and are you able to meet the demand in Alaska, and what are some of the bottlenecks that you're experiencing?
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair. So my name is Val Dreyfus, and I'm a Senior Vice President of Alaska for Matson. And I very much appreciate this opportunity to address the Senate to provide an update on our continued services to Alaska. And the good news is we are operating without interruption. And I would also note that you can continually get updates on our website at matson.com.
I'd also add that we understand, we get it. We understand the important role that we play in all the communities we serve, including Alaska. And we're committed to taking all the appropriate steps to ensure the continuation of services, including deployment of reserve vessels, if we need them, to continue to meet the needs of our customers in Alaska. So what does that mean? It means our sailings, which are twice a week from Tacoma to Anchorage, will continue as they have since the beginning of this COVID-19, twice weekly to Kodiak and weekly to Dutch Harbor. So by example, we sailed last Wednesday from Tacoma. The ship will be in tomorrow. And we sailed last night from Tacoma, and the ship will arrive Tuesday night. Both ships were full of all the needed cargo, so I think people can feel comfortable and confident that the goods are coming to market. In addition, the other carriers, Tote, AML, Samson, the Alaska Railroad, are all continuing their service without interruption to Alaska. So I think from a supply chain standpoint, the supply chain and all the stakeholders in that have worked very well together to make sure that the workers are there to do the work to get the ships moving and the goods delivered once they get to the destination, be it truck or through the warehouse. So I think we can all feel very confident about that. I'd add we continue to monitor all the CDC updates and Coast Guard regulations to make sure that our employees are safe and the supply chain is safe, so we can continue to deliver that cargo. I'd add that I think that the teamwork has been outstanding, not just internally with our employees and their willingness to come to work and do what we need to do to get the goods delivered, but for everyone in the supply chain, including our customers who I've had many conversations with and who are committed to serving Alaska and making sure that Alaska gets what we need here in Alaska. So on another note, we have expanded our technology to enable more employees to work from home, which has been great. So we very much appreciate the efforts that we just heard from our technology companies here to expand the network, as obviously more people are working from home and the demand on that network is much greater, including those watching more movies at home. So I would add that the Matson team continues to work together to ensure that continuity of services, again, including the deployment of reserve vessels if they became necessary, to continue to meet the needs of our customers in Alaska. And we'll continue to collaborate with the service providers and stakeholders in this regard. So, again, we do provide the regular updates on Matson.com. We're also using social media, so Facebook, because we recognize the importance of communication during this period, and particularly where there's misinformation or misunderstandings, we want to make sure that people are getting accurate information. But I think we can all feel very comfortable that the supply chain is working very effectively, and I think will continue to. So thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity to address the Finance Committee. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Senator Olson has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Dreyfus, I thank you very much for keeping the supply facilities open and the barges running. But my concern has to do not so much with the operation that Matson and the other sea-based transporters have, but has to do with the port there in Tacoma that you're sailing from. It's my understanding that there were some issues related to the longshoremen that were either not showing up for work, and there was a consideration that the National Guard was going to be deployed in order to make sure that those vessels that you had sailing north would be filled with the containers that are needed. Is that a concern to you at this point, or does that fear, can that be allayed to the...
No, I think that's not a concern. I mean, the labor on the West Coast, in Tacoma in particular, has been very good, as they always have when we have these crises, whether it's 9/11 or anything else, that they come to work and get the job done, knowing that we have an obligation to keep goods moving through.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. No further questions.
Thank you, Senator Olson. That was actually a concern of mine as well. We just want to make sure that the Tacoma port stays open for business, and that the supply chains actually across the country that services as we collect our goods at Tacoma can continue to Alaska. Senator Wilson has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to expand on that question. What about our Anchorage port? Is there any issues with maintaining that under this circumstance?
No, we've had no issues at all in Anchorage. Everything is working great. The labor is working, which is fantastic.
Thank you. This is great news. Do we have any other further questions at all from committee members? Mr. Dreyfus, that was a very good summary. We really appreciate it. I think it's just reassuring to know that goods and services are still going to be coming into Alaska. Of course, we're hoping to make sure that we've got sufficient medical supplies, which are in short order around the state, protective gear, gloves, ventilators, and things of that nature. But we just appreciate you giving us confidence and reassurance. So that is...
You're very welcome.
Thank you. That is that's the conclusion for today. So we heard some great testimony today about the efforts being made all across Alaska to provide financial assistance, broadband, food, and other goods. I think several of us took notes on the ways the state could help in these efforts, both in statute, federal receipt authority, or direct state financial support. And in particular, we have an unemployment insurance bill that we need to definitely move soon. So we're going to close this meeting at this time, but we are going to probably meet again this afternoon. So be aware, and we'll let committee members know when that happens. So it's about 10 minutes to 11, and we're going to recess until about 1 o'clock. Okay. So at this point, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all of Alaska that tuned in today. Don't forget to angry face this video and share. Angry face the hell out of it. This was one of the most disgusting displays I have ever seen put on by our Alaska state legislators. No, that is lying. I'm sorry. I've seen more disgusting things come out of them than this. But clearly this was nothing to do for the average majority of us Alaskans that are lost of our jobs, are currently going to be paying the price, having a hard time trying to figure out how to keep the lights on inside the house, even though they say they're not going to turn them off now. But it doesn't mean your bill is not racking up while this is going on. You're now able to collect unemployment instantly. Go right on down and file if you've been fired. You're going to receive a little bit more if you have children. They bumped that. They've doubled the price that they'll give you for it. But going by the numbers that they provided there, the average unemployment check per week is only about $325. Most Alaskans are in the price range, or the average payout of somewhere around $1,000 a week. Please tell me how we're supposed to pay our bills when it comes to time to make the home payment, time to pay for the insurances, the vehicle payments. How are we supposed to continue to keep paying for the groceries we're putting onto our table to feed ourselves and our children? They made it very clear that there'll be plenty of available money out there. Lots and lots of money is out there, but you must be well connected and involved with the special interest. If you're one of the 225,000 people in Alaska that are currently living off of welfare, don't worry, you're well covered. In fact, we're doing everything that we can to increase those benefits, give you even more money so that you can survive living on welfare that you've been living on during this crisis needs of living off of government welfare. Oh my God, I was sick to nauseam listening to them talk for the first hour of this, describing nothing more than how we can help the underprivileged people of Alaska that we already spend over 2/3 of the budget to cater to. The only high point that I heard out throughout this entire thing is GCI, ACS, AT&T, you name the telecommunications company, they are giving you either free internet if you have children, or upgraded internet if you already have it with them. Doesn't do a person like me a bit of good, because obviously with what I do, I already got the max plan. I already have children, but they're not going to bump my internet. They're not going to give me free internet. They're not going to give me anything that's going to help benefit my family, even though I have children in this state. They just don't care. It has to do everything to do with the special interest, the underprivileged. If you are a Fortune 500 company, you are a corporation, don't worry. Government is not going to cut 1 penny of the money that you get. In fact, you could hear it clearly during the 2 hours that they're doing everything in their power to make sure that their funding stays well funded. They do have one good positive shining outlining thing that you could say, the rainbow that is developing in the portion of this storm. I'm sure you all heard that school has now been officially canceled until May 1st is when they're thinking of maybe allowing children to go back to school. I don't see it happening this year. I honestly really don't, unless they come out with a miraculous cure. That is something that has been around for a long time and they have a surplus of, that they may need to only do a little bit of tweaking to make sure that it gets spread widely and quickly to put a stop to this pandemic that is happening. Don't know what else to say. Again, we're currently looking at, if you are the special interest of Alaska, you are officially one of those that signed the Recall Dunleavy petition, or you are the owners and operators of Recall Dunleavy, Alaska AFL-CIO, NEA-Alaska, CIRI. I could go on forever, name off any of the 8,000 nonprofits that are a part of that organization. They were the ones that we got to hear today with the special interest talking on television, discussing what they are doing down in Juneau to help us make it through this pandemic. If you are, like me, one of the average majority people out there, you may not have the best credit record in the world. This is all going to be to your detriment. It's not going to help you. Small Business Administration is not going to be able to help you get income to be able to pay your employees to keep them employed, let alone keep yourself in income so that you can afford to survive. Most of us out here, we live hand to mouth. What we are out there earning, we're turning right around and we are distributing it back out into the community as fast as we get it. I earn an income, I'm spending it as fast as I get it. I'm not a rich person, but I'm not poor neither. But this crisis, this virus, this pandemic that is going on, one call in a week's time. In the past week, I've done one call. I had over 24 lined up for this week and next week that were already on the books. Out of those 24 calls, I've had 3 that did not cancel. I guarantee you this is something that is making everybody and everyone out there pay the price. They say, we're going to help you if you're a small business. Here's a small business loan. But guess what? You got to be able to qualify for it. So if you got a dinged credit record, you're already out of the running. You're not even going to have a chance to get in there if you're one of those people that is like I am. What you make is what you earn. What you make is also what you reinvest. You just don't go down to the bank every single time you want money and say, oh, just give me another signature loan. I'll have that paid off tomorrow with my corporate government account that I get paid. This is what Alaska AFL-CIO and other groups like them out there do. This is what they're expecting that the average Alaskan, they're trying to portray this, that they're not catering to just the special interest, but only the special interest qualify for this stuff. 200,000 plus Alaskans are going to find themselves suffering out there. Another 225,000 Alaskans live off of welfare. There is only approximately 150,000 Alaskans that belong to the corporations. These people are a part of AFL-CIO. They belong to CIRI. They belong to the National Bank of Alaska. They belong to the K through 12 NEA of Alaska. They are in all the different places that we hear on an almost daily basis coming out of Juneau, These people's funding can't be cut. We hear them cry and whine and complain like the University of Alaska and everybody else. Don't know what else to say here. I'm pretty much talked out. Watch the video. Share the video. Smash that angry face button. I mean, smash it. Keep on hitting it. This is the most angriest I've been. It's a joke watching what they're calling, we're helping you out during this pandemic and crisis, when in reality, this is nothing more than what we've been hearing for the last 4 years now. Here's how we're going to cater to the special interests. Here's how we're not going to give you your permanent fund dividend. We're going to continue to ignore the statutes and laws that we have on the books. The one economic thing that our government down in Juneau, those legislators could do that would help out every single West Alaskan in the entire state. I don't care how rich you are. I don't care how poor you are. The one and only thing that would guarantee every single Alaskan can help survive through this pandemic crisis, they refuse to do. They refuse to give us our own money, give us the money they damn well owe us that could fix all of our problems. If they were to give me my $4,700 they have stolen, I guarantee you I'll survive the next 3 months. They can completely shut me down. I can completely not have another call to go do, not another job to go do for the next 3 months. That $4,700 that they owe me from the PFDs they have stolen from me would pay my bills and I would survive. The only thing I would have to worry about is how do I pay my electric, my gas, and making sure that my food is put onto the table. As for everything else, that $4,700 would pay for my mortgage, that would make my car payments, every single bill I have for the next 3 months. I know of many other people that are a family of 2, 3, 4. Think of what 4 people's, one family, $4,700 comes in from 4 people in 1 month. Cannot tell me that they would not be able to survive for the next 3 months off of that. But our government says we're too stingy. That money that belongs to you. No. We can't do the most obvious, simplest thing in the world to make sure that all Alaskans survive this. We need to steal that money from you so that we can spend it on the special interest that we spent the damn near the last 2 hours ad nauseum talking about how we're doing and what we're doing to protect them. Again, hit that angry face. Don't forget to share. You guys all have yourself a wonderful Saturday. Drive carefully out there. I don't know where you're at, but it could be snowing. It could be raining. It could be slick as hell. Have a great day.